Mel,
And I'm Janelle.
and this is the Murder Mamas. Welcome.
Hello.
Okay, so today we are here. Next week we are not going to be here, and then we'll be back after that.
Correct.
Yes. Okay, so today we're going to be talking about Into the Fire, the Lost Daughter. The Lost
The
Daughter.
daughter. Yeah.
From Netflix.
This one was really good.
I thought this one was good too.
It's good.
Yeah.
10 out of 10.
10 out of 10. I would recommend watching this.
Very much so.
Yeah.
Because I'm sure we'll do a horrible job at explaining it.
Yes.
You haven't seen it yet. Probably watch it on Netflix.
Go watch it. It's a 2-part series.
Yep.
Yeah. So it opens with we're here with a lady named Kathy, and
You're looking at me.
she's opening a letter from Child Services, the Department of Child Services, and we find out that she had a daughter that she had to put up for adoption when she was 16, and this daughter is missing. So she didn't know that because it was a closed adoption. So she had no idea that this happened when it happened. But her daughter's been missing for quite a while.
Like,
I can't remember.
Since the 80s, right?
Yeah.
Like, it had
Yeah.
been like 11 years or something at that point.
Yeah. So she's getting this letter and she thinks that it's her daughter trying to connect with her, or she thinks that's what the letter is going to be, is like, oh, hey, mom, I'm looking for you. And she opens it up and it says that her daughter's been missing and they found some remains and they'd like to get her DNA tested against these other remains to see if that's her daughter. And she was like, what the fuck? Can you imagine? Like, you have no idea. You haven't seen this child in X amount of years, and now you get this letter. Just totally random.
I can't even begin to fathom the emotional roller coaster that would take me on. And as we get more into the parts, you truly understand like how complex Kathy's feelings
Oh, yeah.
for her daughter are.
For sure.
Alexis?
Yes. And Audrina? It's
Andrea.
Andrea. Okay. Okay, so we're going to be talking about Alexis. That was her given name. That's what Kathy had named her, but her real name or her adoptive name is Audrina. Andrea. Why did I say Andrea?
It's
spelled weird.
Yeah.
That like trips me out every time I look at it, and I'm like,
That should be Andrea.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Andrea.
Okay. So we're starting out in Massachusetts, right? That's where they're at.
Correct. Yeah. Kathy and her husband live in Massachusetts.
Her husband Ed. They've been married for 32 years. They live in Massachusetts. And Ed did not know Kathy's daughter because they got married a little bit later on in life.
Correct. Yeah. So you learn that Kathy was a runaway. And she had ran away from her home in Virginia.
Yeah. When she was 14.
Age of 14 and ended up in New Orleans where she got pregnant and she had Alexis, Andrea.
Yeah.
And then she went back to her mom in Virginia for some support. And the support she got was, you need to give this child up for adoption.
Yeah.
So she did.
And the baby was 9 months old at the time. So she had bonded. I mean, that's a long time to have a baby.
Yeah.
That's got to be hard.
But then Kathy goes back to New Orleans and she becomes a nurse, and then that's where she meets Ed. Yeah. And then they like almost immediately fall in love.
Yeah.
And are married for like 32 years.
Yeah. They're in it. Yeah. So in 2010, that's when Kathy gets a letter from the adoption
agency.
It
was in 2010?
Yeah.
For some reason I thought it was in 1990, but
no.
I could read, yeah, it was.
Her daughter goes missing in 1989.
Yeah, for some reason I thought it was 10 years after she went missing, but no. Oh, it was even longer.
Yeah.
Wow. So she had been missing for what, almost 20 years?
20 years, yeah. Yeah, that's a long time. Yeah, and she didn't have any idea. Kathy knew nothing about that. Which, I mean, I don't know. She wouldn't know, but, ugh, that's hard. So there was a body that was found in a cornfield, and then she had to give her DNA to, and it turns out that it wasn't her daughter. So she was like, I'm glad that it wasn't my daughter, but I'm not glad because I still don't know what happened to my daughter. So she wants to find out what's going on and like how to get to the bottom of this, because she was like, I don't understand, was there ever a case, like did anybody look for her, why is she missing, why has it been so long?
Yeah.
So she wants so Kathy and her husband look up, like they just look in the directory of missing people, and he finds her name, Alexis is on Andrea's name, and she's like the first person on the list of missing people. Do you remember that?
I thought yeah, I remember.
Okay.
They like tried to search.
They searched because Kathy knew her birth date and then the hospital that she was born.
Yeah.
And she didn't know her name. So, but they like narrowed down the search of missing people born on this date in living in this state kind of thing. And then they got it. And there was like a couple people on that list.
Was that
Right?
Ed or was that Carl?
I don't know. Well, now I don't know. Am I thinking of a different moment and putting it together?
Unsure.
Okay. All right. So Kathy opens a Facebook page to find her daughter. And she puts on there anybody who went to school with her or anybody that knows her during that time, please contact me. And that's when we meet Sue, who is a relative. Sue is Audrina's aunt.
Correct.
Yes. And we meet Sue, and she is Dennis's sister, I think. Okay.
The name Dennis just gives me the ick.
Yeah. So we meet Sue, and she is loving, and she misses Audrina, and she Andrea. Oh my God. This is going to be bad, Andrea. And then she tells us about Brenda and Dennis. Correct. So Brenda and Dennis are the adoptive parents of Andrea. This is going to be rough. So they couldn't have children. She had a double uterus or something. I don't remember. Did you remember hearing that? I was like, oh, okay. So when they found out that they could adopt Alexis, Andrea, they were very, very happy. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So they adopt her. She was 10 months old.
Something I just questioned while there, if Andrea was put up for adoption in Virginia, like why did this person from Michigan?
I think it was just
Michigan.
Yeah.
Why did they adopt her? Is it like a nationwide?
I think
network?
it's a national it would be registry.
Oh,
I think.
I have no idea. I just assumed that it would be like a local thing.
Yeah, I don't think so.
But
I don't know.
I have no experience with that.
No, I don't either. Yeah, I don't know. Yeah, you would think. But I mean, adoption's different than like foster care. Yeah. Like foster care, I would assume you'd have to be close.
Local.
Yeah.
Because then you're trying to reunify.
Yeah. But if you're adopting with a closed adoption, it could be anywhere, I would think.
I guess that's true. Yeah. That's so scary.
Yeah. That is scary.
We also learn about Dennis and Brenda. We learn a little bit about like their history. So they were high school sweethearts. And they seemed just very
normal, like loving family who wanted to start their own family with kids.
And Brenda was pretty involved in the church, if I'm not mistaken. Like she took her marriage vows very, very seriously.
Yes.
Very seriously.
Very seriously.
Heavy emphasis on the very.
Yeah. Yeah. And so we think like everything sounds great with them. Like they were loving, caring family. She was loved. Like, everything was happy. So they're in Virginia and they wanted to start a family, and then they moved back to Michigan.
Oh, well, there's the
So
answer.
yeah, there we go. Yeah. So they say that she was a really good kid. She wanted to make everyone happy. She always was checking on everybody to make sure. And then like they said that she like would change her like attitude and like persona to fit in. She always wanted to just fit in with people. So I thought that was kind of like, you could see like as she was walking down the hallway, her outfits were changing, like they were showing how she was progressing. But so she was just a really good kid is what I gathered from that. And then Dennis, so we hear a lot of Brenda and Dennis on tape. We don't see them, like they're not talking to us. It's just recordings that we hear from them. So Dennis says that all of a sudden Andrea starts shoplifting and starts being bad and starts cutting class, acting out and doing all these things, and they have no idea why she does this. And they took her to counseling to try and figure it out, and they couldn't fathom why she would do this all of a sudden. And then we find out that Dennis was molesting her, and I'm assuming that's when all this shit started to happen. She started to act out because Dennis was molesting her.
Yeah, and I think the family talks about there being like a shutdown emotionally with her too. Whenever Dennis or Brenda would be around, like her body language, she would close off, and she was just getting really, really reserved. And this is when she was like 13-ish.
Yeah.
And she, do you mention the friends?
I haven't gone there yet. Yeah, you can go ahead. Yeah.
And so she would sometimes have like friends come over, and there were some really abusive behaviors being exhibited by Brenda and Dennis, like feeding Andrea and her friend, which is mortifying.
Yeah.
What they called a leftover sandwich, which was bread, mustard,
ketchup and
relish.
So basically they were eating hamburgers, the parents.
Or like steak.
Or steak, yeah.
And like an actual dinner.
Yeah.
And they gave Andrea garbage.
Yeah.
And her friend.
Garbage. I can't imagine doing it, like, because the friend would go right home and tell, like, I would do that if I was over there and be like, they gave us bread to eat.
Well, I mean, like, not even just bread, but like something that was so common that they named it.
Yeah.
It wasn't like, hey, this is just what we have to get by.
Right.
Like, we're struggling or anything. Yeah. It was like, no, you have a leftover sandwich.
Yeah.
Like,
yeah.
Huh?
It's pretty bad.
Awful. And then there was another incident with her friend coming over on a Friday and Dennis losing his shit on Andrea while the friend was outside because she was late coming home from the bus stop.
Right.
And she wasn't late at all.
She wasn't late.
So she's confiding in these outside parties, not within her family. And
well, she tells Brenda about Dennis molesting her, and Brenda says that's a lie.
You're lying.
That's a lie.
Yeah.
So she doesn't believe her.
Correct. Yeah. And so then she tells a friend, and a friend says, let's tell the school because they're trying to help. But at that time, the school brought CPS into a room with Brenda and Dennis.
Yeah.
And said, can you tell us what's happening?
Right.
And she said, nothing.
Right. Because the parents are just right there. Like, of course you're not going to say anything.
Correct.
Like, that's so bad. So we get to the day that
she went missing.
She goes missing. Yeah. And Dennis says that he picked her up from school, and she was being very quiet that day. And Brenda had to go to work. And so Dennis had to drive Brenda to work. And so they took the baby. She has a babysit. So they did have an actual daughter, like a biological daughter.
Was it a biological daughter?
Yeah. Yeah. She got pregnant because she said I wasn't feeling good, and Dennis told me to take a pregnancy test, and she was like, no, there's no way. But then I woke up and it was Father's Day weekend, and I took it. So then I said, wake up, daddy, just like that. And I was like, I remember that. Yeah. So to tell her that tell him that they got pregnant.
It's like such a cringe face.
Right.
Is the face I'm making.
Yeah.
I also find it kind of funny. Well, not funny. That's the wrong use of that word. That is not what I mean. Convenient. That once they were able to conceive their own child, it seems like the mistreatment of Andrea just skyrockets.
Yeah.
And it's like really disheartening that likely they never viewed her as their actual family.
Yeah. I think Brenda did.
I think Brenda did. I don't think Dennis did.
No. I mean, he's not capable of, like, yeah. So anyway, Dennis had to take Brenda to work, and she was like, Brenda said, I'm going to take the baby because then Andrea needs to study and do all that. So we're not going to give her any excuse to not study. So when Dennis came back to the house after dropping Brenda off, he says, I put the baby on the couch and I went upstairs to talk to Andrea, and we got I saw that she had stolen some money out of my dresser, and she took her purple coat and she said, I'm leaving, and she left.
With no other clothes.
No other clothes, no backpack, anything.
Nothing else.
Yeah. Just the cash and the purple jacket. And so he calls 911 and says, my daughter's missing, and files a police report.
And files charges.
Oh, yeah.
Because he wants to press charges because she stole money.
He stole the $100 that was in his dresser from his tax refund or whatever it was. Yeah. So it has
shaking my head.
It has their, like, you see they show the thing where it's like defendant and victim and whatever, and I'm like, oh my god, no, stop.
And I do also just briefly want to mention that Andrea loved her baby sister.
Yeah.
Like there's a friend who says, like, she stayed because the friend was like, why don't you, like, run away, basically. And she was like, I can't leave the baby there.
Yeah.
Like, she was always taking care of her baby sister. Like, she really cared about her. Is what it's portrayed.
Yeah.
So
then we kind of go back to Kathy and we meet Carl.
Is this where we meet Carl?
Yeah. And
Carl's a badass.
Carl is like a web sleuth guy who solves missing persons cases.
Because he makes
because
good spreadsheets.
He's a fucking badass who knows how to use Excel.
So what Carl does is he, like, cross-references Jane Doe's and John Doe's that bodies are found with missing persons from that same time period nationally. And he has solved, like, several cold cases.
Yeah.
Just
by using his own
data.
His own
just
spreadsheet.
Data. Just analyzing data with his own spreadsheet.
Yeah. He's amazing.
Very much so.
Yeah.
So Carl is a badass.
So they meet and he helps her. How does that... I know they go to, like, the missing persons conference and stuff together.
They had been doing a lot of stuff together, I thought, like, because there's that other body that was found.
Yeah.
And so they identify her. Yeah, he's able to identify that missing person. But he sort of is just, like, along for the ride.
Yeah.
In helping Kathy
do what she needs to do.
Do what she needs to do and get the closure that she needs. So he's analyzing data. He's trying to find any sort of connections and links.
Yeah. Yeah. And then we meet another person, Meta.
I was going to say.
Yeah. This is where we meet
Here comes Meta.
Yeah. And she was abducted in 1989. Right by where right by where they lived,
Correct.
I guess. Yeah.
In the same town.
Yeah, in the same town.
September? No.
I don't know.
I don't know what date it was.
1989. Yeah.
Well, I'm thinking of September because September is when the other
Oh, okay.
one is.
Yeah. I don't know. But, so she comes and introduces herself to Kathy and says, hey, I was abducted in 1989 by where Audrina lives. And this is the man that did it. Like, she gave a description. The guy's never been caught.
And a truck.
And he was driving a red truck. And we find out that Dennis had a red truck. And Dennis lived in the area. And Dennis fucking already did something to his daughter, we think. And now he's doing something to this little girl as well.
Well, and he matched the description enough.
Yeah. And she says, Meta says, when I heard his voice, I knew it was him.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So Meta was walking over to a friend's house. She was like six, right?
Yeah.
She was walking to a friend's house, and she was by a gas station. The what was it? The windmill or something?
Yeah, windmill, yeah.
And she got picked up and brought to like a campground on the other side of the lake, right?
Yeah.
And was getting sexually assaulted by this man.
Yeah.
And then dogs started barking, and so this man just left her alone in the woods, and he
got scared thinking
Yeah.
there were people right by the dogs.
And so she just walked out of the woods
Back,
by herself, naked,
Yeah.
as a very small child, and nobody ever caught
No.
this person.
Yeah.
Ever.
And she thinks it was Dennis. So that's why she's like connected with
She
Kathy.
didn't know that it was.
No.
She didn't think it was Dennis at first.
At first, yeah.
But she does say, I remember explicitly, she says, I can't help but think that my case is connected to Andrea's.
Andreas, yeah. Yeah, for sure. And I mean, Dennis had a red truck during that time, so.
Which they didn't know at the time.
Yeah.
Like, that's something that Carl helps them
Figured
find
out. Yeah, for sure. Okay, so then Kathy is working. So the cops are kind of involved at this point too, because of the whole. They needed Kathy's DNA to identify if the other person that was missing, if they were related or not. So the cops have been in contact with Kathy, and like she's one-on-one with him. So she requests Dennis's folder with his cases just to see like what his deal is, because she's getting a feeling that she thinks that there's something wrong with Dennis, and she doesn't know what it is or can't prove anything yet. But in that folder, he was charged and sentenced with kidnapping and a sexual assault from 1986. So he had done this before. So this girl in 1989 at 6 years old, and then Andrea at 1989 at 14 years old, like, this is a pattern.
Correct.
So this is something that they need to check into. So Kathy is now convinced after she sees Dennis's file, and then he had some other things in there too. Like, it wasn't.
There was like the random like stalking his coworker charge and like breaking into their house.
Yeah.
That was super weird. I mean,
just random things.
Just sort of, it's like painting a picture of a more comprehensive picture of Dennis's character.
Yeah. Yeah. So now Kathy is like totally convinced that Dennis killed Audrina.
Absolutely.
Like, she's
like,
100%, I'm gonna get you.
Yeah.
And she like stakes outside of his house. She makes calls to him. They had to change their phone number. Like, all of this. She's hardcore.
I mean, at that point, I was like kind of uncomfortable with her behavior.
I get, like, it was uncomfortable, but she knew. And she wasn't going to let it go.
Yeah. I guess I'm just not as I'm not a confrontational person.
I think I would probably do that too. If it was like if it was about my kid and I knew that person killed him, like, I would probably be confrontational. Because he never comes out and says, no, I didn't do it. Like, they just ignore her. Like, if I didn't do it, I would be like, come into my home and let's talk about this.
Yeah. Yeah, no, you have a really good point.
You know?
Yeah.
So she just gets like hardcore like involved with just stalking them, I guess is what it comes down to. And in 2013 they go to a Missing in America meeting, and that's the second time that Kathy went, and Brenda happened to be there the second time. And Brenda said that she wanted to bring pictures of Audrina and all these things so that she could share that with Kathy, but then right when Kathy saw Brenda, it was just like, no, you're not a mother. How could you let my daughter go missing? That kind of thing. Like, it was just back and forth with Kathy and Brenda. So,
well, no, she leaves.
Oh, she left, yeah.
Kathy gets up and walks out
Yeah.
because she's so upset at Brenda. And Brenda's like, she had brought baby pictures of Andrea to, like, pictures of her growing up to share with her. Yeah, I touched on this previously, but, like, I really struggle with my feelings towards Brenda throughout this whole thing. Like, I think that that's a really kind gesture.
I thought that was
she
too.
doesn't have to do.
Yeah.
And I feel like Kathy is ungrateful for that, like, extension of kindness.
Yeah. I agree with that. I could see that. I think Kathy is so pissed that she's putting her hate from Dennis onto Brenda, but I can see why she does that too, because Brenda was there. And if she thinks Dennis killed her daughter, why didn't Brenda step in to help?
Yeah.
You know? That's what I feel. So, like, she's just...
Well, and that's where I struggle a lot with Brenda.
Yeah.
Like, how much choice did Brenda have?
Yeah.
In anything.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah. Dennis is a piece of shit.
Yeah.
So Kathy becomes obsessed, like, who's the guy that she's with? Carl, I think, like, shows her, I'm assuming he shows her, like, the Google Earth. So, like, she becomes obsessed with Google Earth. And she sees something in Dennis's backyard, and she was like, okay, so that thing, what is that? I don't know what it is. And then a couple minutes later, she'll look at it and it'll be different. Like, it wasn't the same thing. And she's like, why is this changing? What is that thing? But she can't get close enough in to see, like, what it is.
Yeah, and, like, Carl goes out and puts a drone over their house.
And it's changing. It's like this box, and then it, like, has snow over it, and then it doesn't, and then it has no grass, and then it has grass, and, like, all this different stuff is happening. So she was like, that's where my daughter is. I know Audrina's right there. Like, we need to go into that yard. And they actually do go check in his yard. They do ground
Yeah, they
radar.
use, like, the radar and a cadaver dog.
But they didn't find anything.
Correct.
Yeah.
Is it the end of the episode? Sounds like it is.
Yeah.
So the end is, you see, I don't know why I was going to call him Ed. You see Dennis getting arrested.
Yes.
By a police officer. And the police officer puts his badge down, or the detective, I guess, puts his badge down, and he says, can you read where this badge is from?
Yeah.
And Dennis says, Norfolk.
Virginia. Yeah.
And you're like, the fuck?
Yeah.
So,
yes.
this is where episode 2 starts.
Yeah. And it opens with Brenda sitting in the police station, and they have her there, and they have Dennis there, and they want to know what the deal is. So, Dennis was arrested for the murder of Kathleen. She was a 25-year-old, married to a Navy person, right? Yeah. And she was full of life. They had just gotten married. They moved into a house, this newlywed couple. She had a cat that that's just what I remember of her picture of her cat. And so her husband goes off. He's deployed, and she's in the house by herself, and her friend comes over, and they're having some wine, and they settle down, and the friend leaves, and Kathleen goes to bed, I guess, and wakes up and feels someone on her bed or on her, I guess. I don't know how did he wake her up? Was he just like on top of her? I don't remember. So she wakes up and Dennis is in there, and according to Dennis, he says, yes, I was in her house. I went in there to look for money. I couldn't find anything. And then I found Kathleen. And she was getting upset because I was in her house. I'm like, yeah, because you're in her house at nighttime, dumbass. Like, what do you think she was going to do? And he said that he had gotten drunk and he was looking for some cash. He found Kathleen and he had a knife or something. What was the knife? And they were wrestling. And it accidentally...
And she stabbed
herself. And he was like, whoa, lady, I don't want any of this. And so he took off. And when he left her, she was up and sitting on the couch and doing whatever she was doing. So he tells this to the cops. And the cops are like...
Well, he takes a really long time to fabricate this story.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, just gonna say that.
Yeah, that's true.
Because at first he's like, I have no clue what you're talking about.
Yeah.
And the viewer is like, wait, how the fuck did we, like, how is he not being arrested for Andrea?
Right.
And like, what is happening? What is this new lady, Kathleen? So then you get a little bit of backstory about that.
Yeah.
Do you have any notes on that or no?
No, go ahead.
Okay. I don't want to steal your thunder.
No, go ahead.
So what we learn is that the murder of Kathleen has been a cold case with the Norfolk Police Department for
since 1980.
A very long time.
Yeah.
1980?
Right?
Was it 1980?
Yeah, September 9th, 1980.
Okay.
Yeah.
So again, it's been a cold case for a very, very long time. And Kathleen's husband was very similar to Kathy in the fact that he was not cool with like it not being fully investigated. And he never stopped looking for answers and for justice for her. So the case gets reopened and they start working this case and they do some like newer DNA analysis and they get a list of 31 names of maybe familial matches. Yeah. Because at this point in the future, we have like ancestry and all of those swab tests.
Yeah.
So there's so much more genetic data that's just available. And this cold case detective is like, I have 31 names located all across the country. What am I supposed to do? Yeah. And his boss is like, well, get the DNA. Right. Like, start collecting. So he's like, okay, like, I guess I'll work on that. And the last name on the list is Dennis's. Yep. And so he was at some, like, regional cold case detectives conference where he met the cold case detective working on Audrina's case at this conference, and they just happened to be talking about this case he's working on. And he's like, I have this like list of names, and the guy's like, oh, that's so interesting. And then he's like, yeah, I think one guy like lives up in your area and his name is Dennis. And he's like, oh, if he's on your list, like that's your fucking man. Yeah. And he's like, wait, what? Like, how do you know that that's my guy? Right. And he's like, well, I'm investigating him for a cold case up by me. Right. So just like the chance of everything that happens, I'm like, wow, what wonderful police work.
Fell into place.
Yes. And so they like set up this whole ruse basically to like bring him into the station and talk to him about Kathy's harassing phone calls is what he thinks. Like he's giving a platform to like complain about Kathy. Yeah. Essentially. And the detective from Virginia doesn't ever say he's a cold case detective or anything. He just is like, I'm an officer.
Right.
And they're like, do you want some water? Would you like anything to eat? Like buddies, pals. And he's like, yeah, I'll take it. So, I'll take some water. And they just like nab his DNA off the cup.
Yep.
And so that's how they connected him to Kathleen's murder. Which I just am still like, sometimes randomly I think about them like, wow.
Yeah.
It's really impressive.
It is impressive. It is impressive. So then we see, like, stuff goes on, and then
Stuff happens.
I don't know what else you want me to say.
There's a lot of stuff. Like, there's just a lot of information.
Yeah, it's just a lot of Dennis going back and forth with the cop.
And that is also a lot of it, too.
It's a long time.
Dennis is a narcissist.
Yeah.
Like, of the highest degree.
He has to tell.
Creates so many stories and
that aren't true.
So many everything that's just not true. Like, and it's always the victim's fault. Oh, shoot. I forgot to mention. The Norfolk detective said the first thing he had to do was he had to prove that Dennis was in Virginia at that time, because Dennis was living in
Massachusetts.
No.
Virginia.
No, Michigan.
Michigan. That's what it is, yeah.
A state that starts with an M.
M.
And he had been charged with a crime that occurred. This one was in September. I think that one was in May.
Yeah.
So he had to prove that Dennis was
in Virginia
on that day.
Yeah.
And he's able to prove that because Dennis had to go away because he worked in the Navy Reserves or whatever.
Yeah. So he was stationed in Virginia
briefly for like a
2
few
weeks. Or
something.
Not very long. Yeah. So they proved it, and he was there.
Yeah.
So he tells a lot of different stories, and then they ask him about Andrea. I don't know. The spelling is weird. I can't get past it. So he tells, again, it's him just like kind of telling the story to his wife. And
that's how they get a lot of the information.
Phone calls that he's giving to Brenda, and that's where they get a lot of the information. And he lies to Brenda as well. So he's like making up stories, and he tells Brenda what he thinks that she wants to hear about what happened to Andrea. And
you did it right.
Yay. And then we get to the end where he admitted, right? Or did they?
It was truly heartbreaking because he spins that story about how it was a mistake.
Yeah.
And he accidentally pushed Andrea down the stairs. Yeah. And she wasn't breathing, and he cleaned everything up, and he went and first what does he first say he did with her body? I can't even remember. I just remembered.
Yeah, he had to cut it.
Made me super sad.
Yeah.
Put her in the shed, and then he had to dismember her in order to fit her into the barrel, which he put on the curb next to the neighbor's trash cans to
get rid of
her be disposed of.
Yeah.
So he's telling his wife of 50 years or 40 something years at this point that he literally threw her daughter away like garbage.
Yeah. And that's the first story he tells.
And she's really upset by that.
Yeah.
So then he's like, all right, that made her mad.
Yeah.
Let me change it. So then he's like, that's actually not what happened. And I buried her in an unmarked grave I wrapped her in a sheet, a white sheet with petal, with
red ribbon.
So that was her favorite color.
Yeah.
And
so that's what he thought would make
her happy.
Deborah would be happy, or Brenda, Deborah.
And so then she's like, okay, where?
Yeah.
And he's like, I don't know.
Yeah.
Like by a cemetery. And she's like, okay, but like I want to bring her home.
Yeah.
Like where? And so finally he like gives in.
Yeah.
For lack of a better word.
Yeah.
And he starts to tell her what ends up being the actual truth.
That he killed Andrea.
And that she is buried in the backyard.
In the backyard.
Of the house that they didn't live in at the time.
At the time that she had gone missing.
Exactly where Kathy had been saying she was.
She was.
For years.
So that had, like, he had dug a hole, so it had looked weird. And then he had put something over it, and then it looked different. And then the seasons happened, and then that made it look different. So she was focused on that, and that was where he had the body. And they opened it up, and it's covered with diapers. Like, I couldn't believe how many diapers there were just piled on top of that. Dirty diapers.
Yeah. So they bring out all those forensic,
Yeah.
like, anthropologists, and they uncover her, and she is covered in trash.
Yeah.
And they find a York peppermint patty wrapper. That stayed at 1989.
1989.
And they find that it is her, and she was dismembered. And I think the most fucking upsetting part to me, and where I really struggled the most with how I felt about Brenda through all this, was he's on the phone, and he's now being charged with 30 to 50 years for involuntary murder, second-degree murder. And he tells Brenda, he says, he's like angry with her. And he's like, now you get to bring her home and on a pretty fucking urn.
Yeah.
And it's like, none of this is Brenda's fault.
No.
The only fault Brenda has in this that I can see is that she married you and she stayed with you.
Yeah.
And that is a big fault. But she didn't kill her.
No.
And it's certainly not her fault that you told the truth.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
And it was just really fucked up, and it really made me realize, like, this is a woman who has had 5 decades, likely, of being manipulated and thought that anything they do is wrong and they're upsetting someone. Yeah, and just, like, a codependency that I don't think I can understand.
Yeah.
Or it's hard to comprehend, you know?
Yeah.
And it makes me feel for her.
Yeah.
And so I struggled a lot with the way Kathy talked about her. Because I'm like, I don't know, I partly see her as a victim too.
Yeah, she is.
So.
But the one thing that I didn't like is when they were on the phone during one of their jailhouse talks, she says to Dennis, Brenda says to Dennis, we should have put you in counseling the first time this happened. And I'm like, okay, so you knew.
Well, I took that as, like, he had been to jail before for these other things. Remember? Like, he got... The whole reason Kathy thought that Dennis had done this, remember? She's like, all because he was, you know, in jail for a few years.
Oh, yeah.
For that one attempted murder. So, like, that's what I interpreted
I
that
guess.
as. Like, I didn't...
But that's pretty bad, though, still.
That's
I don't know.
It's
like
horrific, and it is horrible. And again, I think she does have fault.
Yeah.
But, like, she has to answer to that own fault. Like, it's not illegal to stay with someone who's a piece of shit.
No, it's not.
It's not the choice I would make.
Right.
And it's not the choice I think she should have made.
Yeah.
But...
It is what it is.
And not even it is what it is. Like, what were her options?
Yeah.
You know,
true.
like...
Yeah.
It's not easy to just, like, up and leave
build a whole new life.
A 30-year marriage or a 50-year marriage or any of that. Like, that's not an easy choice to make, and I don't think you have to, like, unilaterally support someone, and I think she did too much.
Yeah.
But again, I think that he is a narcissist who,
if
anyone's ever been in a relationship with a narcissist or knows one, like, you get what it's like to manage and deal with those emotions.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
And it just made me have some empathy for her.
Yeah, I get that.
So, the end is... We're at the end, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. The end is where you see Kathy being really upset. This is what bugged me about Kathy. Brenda... There's a trial, right? And at the end of the trial, the police officers pull her, or like the detectives that had worked the case, because he gets sentenced to 30 to 50 years for the murder of Andrea. And they pull her aside and they say, you know, Brenda gave us half of her ashes. She wanted you to have them.
Yeah.
And her reaction is so strange to me.
Yeah.
Where she's so angry that she got cut up again, and she's like trying to get all of the ashes.
Right.
And like, this woman didn't have to give you anything.
Right.
You know?
Yeah.
Like, to me, again, that felt like an olive branch. But then you hear a jailhouse call where it's like, maybe if I offer her half, then she won't sue for the whole thing.
Right.
So it's like, was it with good intentions, or was it to get ahead of something?
Yeah.
And I was like, nah, dang it, Brenda.
Yeah.
I was trying to give you the benefit of the doubt.
Trying, but I don't know.
Yeah.
She still rubs me the wrong way.
I'm not sure.
Yeah. So that's the end.
Yeah. Well, and they do trick him. They try to tell him that if he tells like everything and the whole truth, that they'll let him stay in Michigan so Brenda can visit him, because that's like a huge motivator for him.
Right.
And then they're like, nah, fuck you.
You're going back to
You gotta go to Virginia.
Yeah.
Which I really appreciated.
I did too.
That old switcheroo.
Yep, I did too.
That was good. But this one, highly recommend.
I recommend it too.
It was very, very good.
Yeah, it was good.
So.
All right.
Bye.